at 8:35 a.m. If I could remind everybody to please turn off your cell phones, we would greatly appreciate it. This morning, we are going to have Kat Rowald come up and lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. Father God, we thank you so much for your protection. Let us remember the horrific event that happened Sunday evening. And let us remember the true spirit in which our country was founded. Father, I ask that you guide and direct this country to regain its honor and its strength, its patriotism, and its love for you. Father, as we move forward through this week, let us keep you ever in the forefront of our mind. Father, as this meeting begins, I ask that you give wisdom and direction to each of the council members and the mayor. Father, we thank you that you are God and we are not. Father, we just lift up our community and ask for your protection. And we do this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
We are now going to ask the Angelo Catholic School 8th graders to please come forward and lead us in the pledges, please. And before we start, I would like each of you to introduce yourselves. So you want to start, Dominique, and tell them your name?
I'm Dominic Perez.
Michaela Andrews. Maricela Jaramillo. Hi, my name is Rebecca Rangel.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one, indivisible.
We have 3 proclamations today. We're going to start off with the Red Ribbon Week. Do we have Eric Sanchez here? And several others. Fantastic. Alcohol is a primary factor in the 4 leading causes of death for young people ages 10 to 21. And almost 100,000 people die each year from alcohol-related causes. Some 15 million drinkers in the U.S. are dependent on alcohol. Adolescents use alcohol more than tobacco or illicit drugs. Young people begin drinking on average at 13 years of age, and young people who begin drinking before age 15 are 4 more times likely to develop alcohol dependence than those who begin drinking at age 21. And alcohol abuse is linked to as many as 2/3 of all sexual assaults and is a major factor in risky sexual behavior and contracting HIV sexually transmitted diseases. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 23 to 31, 2017 as Red Ribbon Week. in San Angelo, Texas, and call upon all in the city of San Angelo to support the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Council for the Concho Valley Cares, and their efforts to increase awareness and to support those coping with addiction in our community. Eric, would you like to come speak a few words?
Good morning. We really appreciate this proclamation and bringing awareness to the issue of substance use disorders, addiction, and alcoholism. This is an issue that's very detrimental to San Angelo and the Concho Valley. It's a very serious one. Our mission at the Alcohol and Drug Abuse Council for the Concho Valley is to save lives and create healthier communities, and we take that very seriously. Unfortunately, in San Angelo and the Concho Valley, lives are lost, and you need only look in the paper to see that. Lives are lost, lives are destroyed, children are harmed and neglected and abused because of the side effects and consequences of substance use disorders, and it's very important that we bring attention to this issue. It's very important that we partner together to work together to do it. ADAC cannot unilaterally address this issue. We need community partners, we need the city, we need everyone to join us in this, and we thank you for this attention and this proclamation.
Good morning, my name is Ray Valadez with ADAC. We want to say thank you, just like Eric said, to everyone in our community for helping us to recognize this time this month as Red Ribbon Week. We just want to also say thank you to our community partners from the Air Force Base. If you'll just wave your hand. They're here this morning. They're here this morning. We were fortunate enough to partner with them this month for some activities on the base, and so we want to thank them for their partnership. And we want to say thank you to all of you for being a part of the powerful prevention message, whatever part you play in that, or whatever role you may play in that message. So again, we want to say thank you for helping us to recognize this month.
Is Judy Sykes here? Good morning. How are you today? Thank you. Good to have you here. Thank you. On Monday, October the 2nd, 2017, Habitat for Humanity of San Angelo joined with partners around the world to rededicate themselves in recognizing the basic right of everyone to have adequate shelter. Habitat for Humanity World Day 2017 joins together a single global network in communicating the message that every one of us deserves the opportunity for a better future. We acknowledge that a decent place to live can remove barriers to opportunity, health, and success for growing families now and generations to come, driven by the vision that everyone needs a decent place to live. Habitat for Humanity began in 1976 as a grassroots effort on a community farm in southern Georgia. The Christian Housing Organization has since grown to become a leading global nonprofit working in more than 1,300 communities throughout the U.S. in more than 70 countries. Families and individuals in need of a hand up partner with Habitat for Humanity to build or improve a place they can call home. Habitat homeowners help build their own homes alongside volunteers and pay an affordable mortgage. Through financial support, volunteering, or adding a voice to support affordable housing, everyone can help families achieve the strength, stability, and self-reliance they need to build better lives for themselves. Locally, Habitat for Humanity of San Angelo, Galilee Community Development Corporation, and the City of San Angelo stand together to help ensure we can all provide affordable housing throughout our community. Through shelter, we empower. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, on behalf of the City Council, I do hereby proclaim Monday, October the 2nd, 2017, as World Habitat Day 2017 and affordable housing.
Mayor Gunter and city council members, all of you, thank you so much for helping us to celebrate World Habitat Day. We really appreciate it. We definitely envision a world where everybody has a decent, affordable place to live. We certainly envision that for our world and also for San Angelo. But Habitat is not the only organization that looks and supports and advocates for affordable housing. We work closely with Galilee, with Terry Shaner. We work closely with the city of San Angelo, with Bob Salas. We thank them for always being there as a partner for us, knowing that there's not one of us alone who advocates for affordable housing. We all do. We all believe in it. We believe that affordable housing, when we build affordable housing, we're building strength, we're building stability for families, we're building self-reliance, and we do that through shelter. So thank you so much for honoring us and celebrating with us today.
Well, I don't think I can beat that. I mean, gee whiz, that's pretty good. Well, you know, the lack of affordable housing is really a growing national problem, but it's also here in San Angelo. We have a problem here in San Angelo as well. And it's going to take partners with all the stakeholders, developers, private sector, nonprofits, and of course a little bit of the city to come together to look for solutions. And I think working together we'll be able to come up with start taking steps towards solving the problem in the long run. So thank you.
You know, when you think about San Angelo, you think about community, and that's what it's all about. And that's what our group works together, but the city of San Angelo works together, and that's what makes us so great. Thank you.
Let's have a picture. Squeeze together, everybody. Do we have anyone here for Small Business Saturday? We will read the proclamation. The government of San Angelo, Texas celebrates our local small business and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 28.8 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States, are responsible for 63% of net new jobs created over the past 20 years. Small businesses employ 48% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. On average, 33% of the consumers' holiday shopping will be done at small, independently owned retailers and restaurants. 91% of all consumers believe that supporting small, independently owned restaurants and bars is important. 76% of all consumers plan to go to one or more small businesses as part of their holiday shopping. San Angelo supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our neighborhoods. Advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, I do hereby proclaim November 25th, 2017 as Small Business Saturday and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Once again, we want to remind everybody to support local, shop local, support our great community because it's your tax dollars that help us create the funds that we need to support the infrastructure that we so deserve in this community. So when you go out to shop or you think about needing something, please look locally first. We need to grow local, support local. Thank you. We will now have public comment. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Council members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The council takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. Do we have anyone here today who would like to come forward and make any comment? With no public comment, we will now move into the consent agenda. I'm going to ask each of the council members if there's something that they would like to pull off of the consent agenda, and I'll start with Billy.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to pull items F, G, and H.
F, G, and H, Billy?
Yes.
Okay. Lane?
Nothing to pull.
Tommy?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
Nothing to pull.
Harry?
Nothing.
Okay. We will start with item F. Billy?
Yes, and all,
Yes.
Need a motion to approve the rest of
I'm
the
going to approve
consent.
those. All right. So with that said, with the exception of F, G, and H, do I have a motion to accept the rest of the consent agenda? A second?
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
All right, Billy, F, consider ratifying COSA DC's resolution authorizing the use of sales and use tax in an amount not to exceed $100,000 for a project that entails acquisition from the city of San Angelo of a 17.58 acre parcel of real property fronting on Houston Hart Expressway within an area bounded by Southwest Boulevard, Sherwood Way, and Sunset Drive, and a development agreement with the city pursuant to which the property will be improved for resale and commercial development as permitted under Chapter 505 of the Texas Development Corporation Act to promote and develop a new or expanded business enterprise that create or retain primary jobs or that provide facilities that enhance convention purposes and tourism.
Yes, the reason I asked for this was just for a little bit of informational overview for the citizens of San Angelo. One of the things that the council, one of our primary interests is economic development. And this certainly, the three that I pulled certainly sounds like it would lend itself toward, that development of economic development. So, Mr. Pena, if you don't mind just sharing an informational overview of item F. I guess we have to take them one at a time.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, Council. I am Roland Pena, Director of Economic Development. Items F and G are related. They really go hand in hand, and I think I can provide a good overview for you. When the board approves a project, they have to determine a project, and the board makes that decision, and that's what you have before you is a resolution ratifying the project. This is a 17.58 acre parcel of land that the city owns that is between Houston Hart and Sherwood Way. And the city back in March issued an RFP to solicit proposals for that property. The Development Corporation and its board felt that we had an opportunity to take advantage of exploring the property for the potential of commercial or business development, hence the creation of primary jobs. And so we embarked on preparing an RFP that we submitted to the city, and we were awarded that. City Council approved that a month or two later. I don't remember the exact date. But we submitted a proposal to purchase the property for $25,000, but in addition to that is conduct the due diligence. And so as part of that, what you have, the remaining of $75,000 that's listed here is for the completion of environmental studies, geotechnical studies, the survey and related work, closing costs and so forth. And we do seek higher skilled, higher growth potential type of companies that are higher paying positions. Item G, so once item F is approved, then that allows us to secure the engineering company that will help us conduct those studies. So we want to determine whether we have some environmental issues and whether the land is developable and whether we can pursue the vision of turning that parcel into a commercial and business development project. With that, I'd be glad to help answer any questions that you may have.
Are there reasons to believe there's going to be environmental problems? Are we digging a hole that we can't dig out of?
We need to confirm, part of the RFP provided some prior environmental studies that are outdated. We believe, based on what we saw from the RFP, that all the requirements under TCQ had been met for the piece of property, but we need to confirm that so that we can ensure the potential developer or buyer or corporate headquarters to feel comfortable that we have updated information and that the land is developable.
Do I have question from council? Further question? Billy, do you have further questions?
No, I don't, ma'am.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion to approve F?
Yes. I move that we approve item F on the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
7-0. Then G, do you want to further discuss G, Billy? Do you have questions on it? I know we said they were connected, but are there further questions on G?
No, I think Mr. Pena did a good job of explaining that and helping us understand, so I make a motion that we approve item G on the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, item H, consider ratifying COSA-DC's resolution authorizing the use of sales and use tax funds in an amount not to exceed $300,000 to provide an economic development incentive to Detmar Logistics, LLC, for a project related to business enterprises that create or retain primary jobs as authorized for a Type B corporation under Local Government Code, Chapter 501, Subchapter C.
This is a resolution that authorizes that the board has to make, again, determine the project to allow us to use the funds for the purpose of the creation of jobs and create an incentive proposal to the company. It is an exciting project for us, and I will tell you that the board has a policy that we want to move quickly with projects so that there is no delay. We do meet on a month-to-month basis. We are in negotiations with the company now and in the process of developing a performance agreement. I think that's important for the council to know and for the public to know that a performance agreement is just that. They have to perform before they receive any incentives. It is a company headquartered out of San Antonio. I'm trying to convince them to move the headquarters to San Angelo, and so we'll see if I make any headway with that. But it is a transportation and logistics company of frac sand, and they do specifically work in the Permian and Eagle Ford shales, although they transport all across the nation. Your resolution states that they'll create 120 jobs. I will tell you that most of our analysis that we conduct goes to 10 years, and we are looking at about 195 new jobs and a capital investment of $5 million. I will also tell you that the project is dynamic right now. It is moving, and it's looking more to our favor, so it may be that we'll have a larger capital investment than you see currently in the resolution and in the information that you've heard now. So we're excited about what's happening there. Our proposal is strictly for job creation. We only want to incentivize for the first 5 years at $2,500 per job, and that's $300,000 in incentives, and it does require the capital investment. These are $75,000 average annual salaries. So for us, it is the type of jobs that we want to create, higher paying jobs that will be located in our community. So with that, I would be glad to answer any questions. I will tell you that the representatives of the company are sitting in the audience. I do have Detmar Logistics, the president and the owner and the manager here in the event that you want to ask them any questions.
I would love for them to come forward, please.
I would just the only caution I would state is that we are in negotiations. So if we can just stay away from any of the details, and unless you want to go into executive session, but I would stay away from that because we are negotiating that right now. Okay.
I'd really like an opportunity for you to just really state your name. I think it's exciting to see new business opportunities, but I also think it's important that we know the faces behind the conversation and the corporations, because it's all about people at the end of the day.
Absolutely. My name is Matt Detmar. I'm the president of Detmar Logistics.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about your background.
As far as my background or the company's background?
Both would work.
Okay, well, I'm from San Antonio, born and raised, graduated from Texas State University. Once I got out of school, I started this business with my father, who's back there. We've kind of grown it over the past 5 years, and we started with 3 trucks. Today, we are at 187. We've grown about 300% over the past year, mainly. We moved to San Angelo about a year and 6 months ago. We've grown substantially, and the community here has been great. We did look at other places to move to, however, just the community that's here, with the help of the Economic Development Committee, we do feel that San Angelo will be our home for the next 10 years at least.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? We'd love to meet your father.
He looks happy to be drug up here. Yeah.
He doesn't want to meet us.
Let's go get interrogated.
We're good today. Welcome.
And we started this company together, and he's probably took the company to another level. He's had a lot of success and done a really good job of growing the company and been a really good cheerleader, for lack of a better word. And so, after 2 years of working together, the banks were impressed on how he was running the company and lent him the money to buy me out. So since then, I've just kind of been, again, just playing a cheerleader. So
Cheerleaders are necessary. All great teams have one.
yes.
Would you please come forward as well?
Mayor, Morgan Council. My name is Craig Coles. I am the Safety and DOT Manager for Detmar. I've been with Detmar now for going on about 9 months. Just a little bit, just in my little background of it, 9 months ago in January, we had 60 trucks. And like Matt said, we're up to 187 now. On the safety aspect of things, this right here is going to significantly help us get into a better place, a bigger facility. It's going to be a safer place for my workers to work. On the DOT side, also on that aspect. So, and I also would like to say one other thing. I have worked hand in hand with Mr. Pena and Ms. Scott back there. They have been absolutely incredible. They have called me almost every day, or called Matt to talk to us and make sure we have all the details. I think I'll allow Shannon to, she's only allowed to ask me 5 questions every time. That's it. But they have been absolutely terrific in this aspect. So I do want to say that also. I want to thank them for helping us with this, to getting this off the ground and getting it to where we can come in front of y'all. So thank y'all very much.
Do I have questions from City Council?
Mr.
Mr. Cole's his hometown guy. He didn't mention that, but
I
he,
did not. Yeah,
say it again.
I have been in San Angelo since 1983. As Mr. Hebert knows, I've been part of his church for many, many years. Also, my mom and dad have been here. My dad's a local businessman. My mom's actually the former superintendent of the school district, Joanne Rice. So we have. I got lucky enough. I was gone for a little bit of time, but Matt got me back here, got me back home, and I'm very proud to be back home. So this has been a great, incredible opportunity for myself, and I think this is going to be a great opportunity for our company.
Thank you.
Mr. Coles, are you Lakeview or Central?
Central, class of '93.
Okay, all right.
You have to tell me which side I have to say that to.
Yeah.
North Chadburn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was class of '93 of Central High School.
Go Cats.
Thank you.
There you
see
go.
y'all here.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Well, we believe in growing local and supporting local, so thank you for coming up and sharing a little bit of your background with us.
thank you.
Are there any further questions on item H? Then do I have a motion?
I just want to say I got way more than I thought I was going to get when I asked Mr. Pena to give us that informational overview. So it's incredibly exciting to meet the owners of the business that we're looking forward to partnering. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was on. It's always automatically on. I'm afraid. But anyway, so thank you. Thank you, Detmar, for considering San Angelo. When we look at the investment that we're about to make, you know, the citizens hold us accountable for that, but I think this certainly is a good investment. So, Mayor, I make a motion that we approve item H.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Mayor, just one last thing. I'm glad that Mr. Coles brought up Shannon and Bob back there, because we do have a team, and they're doing just a great job. This is what probably the best part of our jobs is to be able to work with our existing companies and help them continue to grow. So I just want to point that out. Okay, thank you.
Grow local, support local.
Yes.
We will now move into our regular agenda, starting with item A. Appeal of the Planning Commission's denial of 2 variances associated with the third replat in Block 2, Sunset Ranch Estates, Section 2. 1, a variance from Chapter 10-3-A-1 to allow Grand Canal Road, a collector street, to maintain 50 feet of right-of-way in lieu of 60 feet. And 2, a variance from Chapter 10.111.A.2 to allow Grand Canal Road, a collector street, to maintain 28 feet of paving width in lieu of 50 feet on 3.795 acres, generally located approximately 1,230 feet southwest from the intersection of South U.S. Highway 277 and Grand Canal Road. John, you're on.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. As you mentioned, this is an appeal. The Planning Commission denied the variances on this particular plat, and so the applicant has appealed to you all for possible relief and actually granting the variance that the Planning Commission denied. You mentioned the location. You can see here, and in a minute there'll be some maps that show a little bit larger area to show the context. But the area in red on the map you see there is the subject tract. You may recall that at your last meeting you dealt with 2 rezonings for this actual area, and that those rezonings were on second reading as well. So these are all related.
John, just a real quick question. Since this was a denial at the Planning Commission, this requires a supermajority?
This does not.
Okay.
Some things do, some things don't. This is one that does not trigger that supermajority. This is the approved replat, basically reconfiguring the lots. This was one lot that is now split into 2 separate lots. And then if you recall, this was 2 lots that were combined into one new residential lot. This plat has been approved. It's just waiting on your decision on whether or not to waive or not waive the requirements for improvements here on Grand Canal Road at the front of the property. So this is the area, as well as showing some nearby plats. You can see that This is the subject area right here, Grand Canal Road. The right-of-way that's required under the city's subdivision ordinance is 60 feet. There's currently only 50 feet, and so they would be responsible for half of the additional. The assumption is that properties on one side of the road put their half, properties on the other side of the road put in their half. So it's 10 feet short in right-of-way, so they would be asked to dedicate 5 feet of the front of their property as part of the plat. Similarly, there's a paving requirement. Currently, this is designated as a collector street. Collector streets have a minimum paving width of 50 feet. The road is currently at 28 feet. So the ordinance would again require them to participate in their half of the paving. The total shortage of paving is 22 feet, so they would be expected to pave an additional 11 feet for that roadway.
Mr. James, excuse me, who would be required to do that?
The developer. When we come in with a plat for a property for development, that's the time at which the subdivision ordinance establishes the requirements to improve all utilities and roads. So that's the time at which they have to run new water and sewer lines, roads, to make sure that the properties they are creating are developable with all adequate facilities. Now, those can be, in some cases, delayed or deferred. One of the options they have, instead of actually paving the additional paving, is to put up a financial guarantee so that in the future the city maybe can do a large project for a much bigger area and they would be responsible for their piece rather than paving 11 feet just in front of their property.
I have questions about this concerned property. I've been driving past this on a project that I've been working on for the past month. You have this.
Lane, would you put your microphone a little closer, please?
You have this house that is, if you're looking at the gate to the right, their fence line is even with their fence line. Then you look at a little bit further east. At the steel yard, you have their fence line even with their fence line, with a structure of the corner being right up to the fence. Mm-hmm. So if we required them to give that right away and pave, how are you going to work out the issue of that right away later down on each side sandwiching this property?
Well, one of the primary questions here is this road going to be widened at some point in the future? We think it is. 28 feet is not a very wide road, and that's one of the reasons we showed this. In this area that's mostly agricultural and undeveloped, we already have developments going in that area. So if you picture, in fact, if you look at a larger area, if you picture all of that developed someday, whether that's 5 years or 30 years down the road, we suspect that a 28-foot road is not going to be sufficient. So having said that, someday this road is going to be widened wider than 28 feet. The question is that going to be an expense that the taxpayers are asked to pay 20 years from now, or is it an expense that the person developing these lots
But what I'm
should have
looking
to
at
pay?
is the overall picture of the percentage of how that property, along with the other two properties, are too close for this road. What would it take to develop on the other side of that federal land where that canal is?
If we were to, basically it would mean the city would have to acquire the land from the federal government and expand all the expansion of the road in that direction. That's definitely an option, but that obviously does create additional expense to the city. I will say, I'm sorry, that was part of the argument that some of the other plats in this area, similar variances to this, were approved in the past based on that logic.
I'm not sure how close it would be coming to that residence on East Cleary's Court that I'm looking at. You can kind of...
Let me see if we have a closer, I think that's a little bit closer.
To the left of that.
John, could you draw an arrow where he's pointing?
He's talking about this house.
Right there, that house.
Okay.
And so this property line, that's not very straight, but that property line runs, I believe it's about 10 feet from that house. And so you're right, if let's say we get the 5 feet from this property as the ordinance requires, we did not get the 5 feet from this property. And so if someday we come in to widen the road, we would have to purchase that. And you're right, that would move the property line 5 feet closer to that house. So now the house would be 5 feet from the property line instead of 10 feet from the property line.
Along with that structure of the steel yard, closer to 277.
Further down.
Further down.
Yeah.
Because the corner of the back, it looks like the back left corner of that structure, right up against, and it would be right below where it says proposed replat in the white.
So right in here somewhere.
Right about there. That structure there is right up against that fence line, so there's no moving that fence.
Well, Lane, it takes it all the way back down Grand Canal, back towards the lake too, going with your line of logic. So I guess, John, one of my questions would be, you just alluded to it very briefly 3 seconds ago. Variances were granted in the past that really should not have been granted. And if this had been done appropriately by past boards and commissions, then we wouldn't be facing this issue today. The Planning Commission probably did what they should have done when they denied this. However, it seems to me that now the situation being what it is on the ground, that it's probably, in everyone's best interest for us to look at working with the federal government to get all that we need on the other side when that road needs to be widened because of the length all the way up and down Grand Canal. I don't really know how far back this goes because I think the picture you have there, it's kind of hard to tell, but we're going to be affecting a lot of this property along Grand Canal here. That's my observation.
Are there a lot of accidents on Grand Canal Road?
I don't believe that, I'm not aware of any. That's something we did not look at in this. Again, part of the logic for this isn't, I would think the road there may be sufficient for today. The question is when there are 200, 300, 500 more houses out there, at some point that road's going to be deficient and will need to be widened.
Brenda, some years back there was I believe a bicycle pedestrian accident out there where a bicyclist was killed. And that's probably been 10, 15 years ago. But
And how highly trafficked is that road today?
It has traffic. We did not pull traffic counts on the road.
So, John, I didn't quite get the point that was made about us buying the federal land. So how would the city purchasing that federal land, how would that help this situation for this variance?
So this whole canal area is owned by the federal government. And so I think the thinking, and again, the waiver on this property made that point that rather than taking land or requiring paving, from this property here, it could all be acquired from this property. And so instead of getting half from the development on the south side and half from the federal government, that presumably we could negotiate to get all of the additional right-of-way we need on the north side and not require any of these developments to do any additional right-of-way or paving.
Do we have any idea of the cost to purchase, that property? If we think about our responsibility of financial impact to the citizens of San Angelo, I think that's something we have to consider. So how much would it cost to purchase, that versus somebody wanting to develop the property and paying for it themselves?
I think not only you're looking at the cost of purchasing the land, but the cost of the road, et cetera. And I think the question mark is, number one, we can talk all day long about buying it from the federal government, but who said the federal government wants to sell it?
Well, and not just that, but if you look at prior decisions that have been made where in developing an area, the development, I think of Butler Farm, and now the residents of Butler Farm have nowhere to come but to the city to ask all the taxpayers to pay for the relief that the developer didn't pay for up front. I think of Christian Village, when all of that was going on with that area flooding, the citizens ended up having to pay for that because, you know, we made these variances or, you know, I don't know, I don't think we, you know, paid enough attention maybe at that time, and maybe we did variances. So that's my concern. You know, I don't want somebody to have to do something they don't need to do, but if we have ordinances in place, then I struggle with continuing to make variances that end up in the long run costing all of the citizens out of, you know, taxpayers to be required to pay for it. So that's my concern.
And let me
I'll
just
go along the same thing, John, not to interrupt, but
Sure.
I think all 7 of us were elected up here to make sure that we're utilizing taxpayers' money in the best way we can. And so I'm going to have to agree with Billy. Even though it's tough for a developer now to have to come in and do this, I don't know that the rest of the taxpayers should be saddled with the burden of having to purchase federal property or develop that area in that because we want to use tax dollars. I'm not in agreement with that.
Well, it sounds to me, John, am I right if you say that if one side's going to be developed and widen the other side, so we're going to have to be encroaching on federal property anyway?
potentially, yes. If we want the full right-of-way we need, as the subdivision ordinance has defined the minimum standard we need, then yes, we're only asking this property for half, and so at some point, we would have to be getting the other half.
Ask for that residence and that steel yard for theirs also. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move to approve the appeal.
Second.
Well, and let me just remind you that these are two separate appeals. One is for the right-of-way and one is for the pavement. So you could approve one and not the other, approve both, or approve neither.
What's the minimum right-of-way without encroaching too close to his fence to where he had to move that back for paving rights?
For the current property or the home that's next?
Well, it'd be the same.
In either case, they're currently at the property line, so any additional right-of-way is going to encroach on the house, and any additional right-of-way is going to encroach onto the current property of the subject property.
So if we take any right-of-way, that's going to force his fence back?
Correct.
Well, Lane, then there's also a retention pond in there that comes into play at some point, which would be additional expense to have to redo that retention pond as well today for the developer of the property.
Is there a retention pond now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We would have potentially a lot that could be undeveloped and sit there.
Good.
Would you repeat? I'm not sure what the motion is, Lane, so I need you to state the motion.
I see Russell and the owner, Lauren. Can I get them? Do they have any comments?
My name's Lauren Edwards. I'm the one trying to purchase this property. I understand what Ms. DeWitt has explained about putting the burden on widening the road on the taxpayers, and I understand that. But on the south side of that road, there's physical barriers, houses and buildings that will not allow future expansion of that road even 11 feet. So 11 feet, you're going to either have to buy buildings and houses, or you're going to have highways that at 45-mile-an-hour speed limit that are 16 feet from a house. That's going to affect resale value on that property because nobody wants a highway 16 feet from their house where people are going 45 to 50 miles an hour. And then at the end of 277, which isn't really in the pictures or the slides that were presented, there's a building that is 2 feet off the property line. It's 21 feet from the edge of the roadway. So that property is going to be even closer. You have all the existing commercial properties that are east of that had the same fence line and property line. All of those will have to be purchased and moved over. So you run into physical barriers that may not be able to overcome just by moving a property line 5 feet and adding 11 feet of paving on that side. The more logical side is to buy the undeveloped land from the federal government to build on that side, because there's no physical barriers there. It's all undeveloped land. But even to widen the other side 11 feet on the federal side, you're still going to have to get some easement. If you did 11 on Grand Canal and 11 from the federal government, you're going to have to buy easement from the federal government anyway to get your 20 foot from the fence line or from the property line to the paving. So some kind of government purchase is going to have to happen for that land to be, or for that widened roadway to go to 60 feet. It's going to have to happen anyway.
You know, what this just points up, when variances are granted, at some point in time, whenever this all started, then it just cascades down to what we have here today that we have to deal with, one way or the other. So it seems to me this is a good time for us to emphasize publicly to our boards and commissions. While sometimes they don't like to listen to staff, sometimes the staff knows what's the best thing in terms of long term. So, you know, we're dealing with something that could have happened 10 years ago today. So, you know, that's what we're being forced to deal with. Hopefully we can avoid doing those sorts of things in the future as a council, but also the boards and commissions can too.
I need to ask a question, a procedural question. Do we absolutely have to vote on this today? I'm not familiar with this area, so I hear what this gentleman is saying and the points he's making, and at some future point, we may have to do something anyway. So is it possible, and I may be the only one seeing it this way, but I'd like to take a look at what we're talking about and understand it better. Is it possible to table this?
Yeah, it could be postponed to the next meeting.
Well, I would like to suggest that we table it, and maybe some of us that are not that familiar with what the gentleman is telling us could actually take a look at it and kind of understand better the cost associated with all of it. Would be, do I need to make a motion?
Well, I'd like to have some comment first.
Oh,
I mean, and Lauren, I'm with you. We're 4 streets too late, 4 sets of houses too late to correct this. So to me, it looks like we're forcing him to put a chicane in a road when we know sooner or later we're all going to have to go to the other side of the road. I mean, we've missed that opportunity. Shame on somebody, could have been 10 years ago for doing it, but you know, he's probably trying to do business here. I get that, but when we look at it, to enforce him to something, we've already let 3 other people get away, and if we have to go back to that property, we got to buy 3, 4 houses, just looking at it here. I mean, he's got a set of property there that I would say it would be advisable, whatever you're going to put on there, to keep it 28 feet further back from your property line. It might avoid something later, but just to be consistent with what we've done, and in all common sense, you're right. We're going to have to go the other strat to get it. So I'm saying just consistency to make him be the one oddball out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets we've already let go. I see his point here.
But Tom, you know, I would just say to you, you know, because mistakes have been made in the past, do we keep going down this line, making exceptions? Because it never ends. Somebody else will come along later and say, well, you did it. I don't remember your last name, so may I call you Lauren?
Yeah.
You did it for Lauren, so then you need to do it for me. And it just goes on and on. So when do we stop and say, let's make a good decision here based on as much information as we can get and the cost to the taxpayers rather than continuing on and on? And then I have one question, and I'm not sure, but John, I think you said something about a developer putting up a guaranteed something. Will you repeat that so I can?
Yes, one of the options that the ordinance allows is rather than asking them to pave the pavement today, they can put up a financial guarantee, a bond or a letter of credit that would allow that to be done in the future. Now, unfortunately, that only allows us to extend it a maximum of 3 years. So if we were to ask for the bond, and let me step back. It's not what we ask for. It's purely their decision whether to pave or put up a financial guarantee. But if they put up a financial guarantee, we only have 3 years to basically call that in and make the improvements. Otherwise, it goes away.
So if we don't do it within 3 years, then he would get his money back if he chose to put up that financial guarantee?
Correct.
Is there anything in the CIP program that addresses this road? Because I think the other issue is if you're talking about it today, are we talking 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road for this project? And so I think we have to look at it holistically and say, what are we saying about today? What did we do that is creating this problem 2 years ago, a year ago by giving variances? But what's a grand plan as a city for down the road? Because I think making a decision today that's singular addressing the issue today without the bigger picture is a problem.
Mayor, and if I may, I know that we had recently an ordinance that we had addressed that would give a little bit more authority to James, the Director of Planning. I assume, James, in a situation like this, when you have the Planning Commission grant a variance, that you could actually bring it to the City Council if you had a concern about the future effects of granting that variance. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. If they were to grant a variance, staff can appeal that to council, just like now an applicant can appeal to council.
Okay, and that's again to protect the city in the future from situations like this. So if the Planning Commission made a decision that staff felt, wait a minute, there's bigger implications in the future, we need to bring that back.
Correct.
I just wanted to make sure that the citizens also understood that we did put that ordinance in place to make sure that it actually protects them as well.
Sure.
So John, a question right here. This would be the only lot from 277 to Country Club Road that hasn't got this waived.
That's correct.
Okay, so it would be the only one thing, and I mean, when you look at it on the map, there's just one set of property. It would be the only one sitting in the middle that would have this binding him.
I think, John, would you illustrate that by?
It's basically the red line on this map.
So the solution is from Country Club Road further, we don't grant these variances. It's too late on this one for this stretch.
I think that's a fair argument that this is the last one in this red stretch. I would reiterate what you just said, is that as new development happens in this new stretch, we don't make that same mistake in the future.
And that's where I'm going with it, Billy. He's got people on both sides have been granted. He would be the only spot in there that wouldn't have that. To me, it's not fair and consistent on that whole road, and to be honest, we wouldn't develop a road like this to go straight, but from Country Club Road on, we need to stick to it.
I guess, Tom, that would ask a question then. So if that other property east develops and we hold the developer responsible for making sure that it's correct width road, then you've got that spot between where the developer is and Country Club, that it'll be the only narrow spot. Is that right? So then the city has to come in and purchase that property to make that street the width that it needs to be. One side or the other. Is that correct?
Well, but you'd have to go all the way down. I think this is a question more towards John than towards Tom.
Well, yeah, I think, I mean, let's say that we require it all along the purple as future development happens out there. You're going to have the red strip that's substandard, and someday, presumably, that'll have to be fixed. But
when you say it will have to be fixed, what's the fix down the road?
Well, the fix, and kind of to answer your earlier question, in terms of long-range plan, this tells you the long-range plan. We have an ordinance that says this is a collector street. We have a plan that says collector streets ultimately should have 60 feet of right-of-way as a minimum and 50 feet of pavement as a minimum. So even though there's no current CIP project to make that happen, we've said someday this road should be 50 feet wide with pavement. And so assuming that bears out in terms of future traffic down the road, the city will have to figure out a way to get that extra width, most likely from the federal government side.
And that'll be at the cost of the citizens, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
The other thing that Mr. Edwards touched on, but if the road is developed to its full width, we're going to be doing business with the federal government anyway. It's just a question of how much.
We do have a motion on the floor.
We do have a motion on the floor,
Yeah.
and we will, but what I'd asked was for Lane to restate his motion, because I think we got into the weeds on some other additional conversations.
The motion is to accept the appeal to, for Mr. Edwards to grant him these variances.
Both denials?
Yes.
Appeal both denials.
So to overrule both denials and
Overrule.
approve the variances requested.
And I'll second that.
I think we,
Tommy seconded.
I seconded it, yeah. I second Lane's motion to.
Is there
grant
further
both.
public comment? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Or nay.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 opposing, 3 in favor. Motion.
can we raise our hands for those who are?
All in favor of approving the variances, raise your hand. 3. All opposed? Motion fails.
At this point, you can take another motion or you can postpone, however.
Now, can we have another motion in regards to this conversation?
A motion to postpone to allow for further.
Correct.
I'd be willing to do the 5-foot variance on the property line if it was deferred until it was developed. Any additional buildings I'd put on there, we'd add an additional 5 foot of clearance, and I will give that 5-foot variance on the property line for widening of the road. And then if the city ever decides to widen that, they've got that property there, they don't have to purchase it, I'll give it to you now. If that'll be some middle ground.
Okay.
Because I don't think you're gonna be able to physically widen that road on that side.
Do you want to go?
You're
look
not
at it?
going to.
I
Not
would
gonna be
like to,
able
yes.
Do you think I'll put a motion out to postpone until Billy can, and other people, other council can take a look at it?
I second that motion.
All in favor? Oh, wait,
Aye.
any public comment on that? All right, all in favor of postpone it till the next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Object? Motion passes to hold off until the next meeting so we can do further research. Okay. B, consider awarding RFB-FD-03-17, construction of Fire Station Number 4 to Mid-Tex of Midland, Texas, in the amount of $3,214,200 budgeted for purchase in fiscal year 18, and authorizing the city manager or designate to negotiate and execute any related documents. Brian, you're on.
Morning, Mayor, Council.
morning.
Brian Dunn, Fire Chief, City of San Angelo. Here this morning to look at the bids for the new Fire Station 4, which would be located at 3415 Edgewood and would replace the existing old Station 4 that's located at 702 East Avenue L. 21 bid packets were sent out to different construction personnel. 3 were returned with bids, Midtex, JC Commercial, and Onyx Construction. The base bids were $3,062,000, $3,427,777, and $3,101,994 for their base bids. What you have before you is the alternates that we wanted in the station. The connecting driveway, the bifolding doors, and the recirculation fan systems to eject diesel exhaust fumes out of the stations, for the total of the bid that you see that we presented to you for $3,214,200. And And that was the lowest bid for those totals. There's also some other expenses that the fire department manages or takes care of because we believe we can do it cheaper than having it bid into the contract. The fencing, the landscaping, and then all the interior stuff. There's also two other expenses with $36,929 in remaining architect fees to be paid and a gas line that has to be put in for $12,872. The total upcoming expenses for that are $3,454,001, as you can see in the financial impact of your packet.
Let me ask you a question. Are you saying that you have, what is budgeted in the fiscal year 18 budget?
Right now, funding sources that we have sitting there currently are $3,029,978 in account 517-9,800-0720 and $325,386 in account 101-9,800-0710. We are short $98,637. The funding source for that is we are fixing to receive $630-something thousand in that Medicaid supplements one-time payment as the program goes that we file for every year. So we added that as a funding source for the last $98,000.
And what does those monies usually go to pay for?
They're not guaranteed, Mayor. They come in as we file them for the year for underpayment on the ambulances by Medicaid or uninsured personnel. So they're a one-time expense, not a revenue stream. It's a one-time thing that come in. There is no monies dedicated to expense because we weren't sure how much we were getting, but we have found out and it may already be in the accounts. I got an email this morning saying that most of the people received their Friday or Monday, and I know we were getting $630-something thousand for that.
So the $600-some thousand, you're pulling $98,000 out, and then the balance of that money is used for what?
City's discretion.
And the low bid was what?
On the base bid or with the alternates?
The base bid?
The base bid was $3,062,000.
So the difference between the
three alternates we added brought it up to $3,214,000. The bid actually come in about, I was expecting this bid to come in at $3.8 to $4 million. So it actually came in quite a bit under. I think there's a little bit of lull right now before the oil picks up. We were very lucky when we bid those up, the twins. This station is the triplet to the two previous ones. I think when we got those other two bid back then, we got it right before the oil boom started because construction costs has went through the roof in the last 7 years, and we saw that with the training center. I mean, that was pretty rough. This one actually came in, like I said, about $500,000 less than what I thought it was going to.
Is there flexibility on the piece of real estate for any further expansion, development of any kind, or are we maxed out on the actual piece of real estate that this is being built on?
For city purposes, there would be expansion stuff. If the city needed to put a tower or something like that, there will be a retention pond on the property. As far as commercial business, it abuts a residential neighborhood. It's a 3-acre piece of property right there, and it slopes down, so there is a retention pond to catch any runoff or drainage to the north end of that property.
And can you tell me where this is located?
It's 3415 Edgewood.
On the corner, Brenda, of Edgewood and Chadburn as you're headed towards South Gate of Goodfellow.
Do I have any further questions for Brian from council?
It's in the heart of District 1, Mayor.
Any questions from council? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move to approve.
A second?
Second.
Do I have comment from the public?
Yes, Council. How many square feet are we talking about?
The fire station is approximately 11,000 square feet.
Do I have further public comment? there's no further comment, then we will take a vote. All in favor of approving the $3,214,200, which is budgeted in fiscal 18, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Item C, second reading and public hearing of an ordinance for the vacation and abandonment of a .642 acre, 28,000 square feet segment of the South Marie Street public right-of-way, generally located between Bryan Street and Roosevelt Street. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is second reading, so this is an item you saw last time, and you asked us to put it on regular agenda for further discussion. But this is the abandonment of the area in red you see there on the map of Marie Street between Bryan and Roosevelt. This is just the future land use plan and existing zoning for the area, and just looking at that street that would be abandoned. Just a different map showing the property lines. This is the applicant, the owner of that property, and they would be acquiring basically that abandoned right-of-way if you choose to abandon it. This is the surrounding area. As you can see, Roosevelt is designated as a minor arterial, planned to be a fairly major street for circulation within this area. Although as noted here, it's currently just a caliche street, 32 feet wide. Ultimately will be a 64-foot wide street. And then similarly, Bryan, there to the north, is planned for 40 feet pavement, but currently is 40 feet, but it's caliche material rather than actual pavement.
When is it planned to be paved?
Well, again, typically that would be paved by the developer, which in this case is the adjacent property owner. I will note that both Bryan and Roosevelt currently have sufficient right-of-way widths, and so should this move forward to a replat, there would be no additional property that would be needed for right-of-way. It would just be a paving obligation. This is consistent. All abandonments that come to you, or most of them, if not all of them, have required replat of the property to incorporate the abandoned right-of-way into the overall property of the adjacent property that's acquiring that right-of-way. It does ensure the creation of the new lot. One of the questions that came up last time was, well, what if we just required them to replat that right-of-way? That is within your discretion to do it that way. The one problem that we see with that is they are acquiring this right-of-way for basically expansion on their site of a parking lot and a fire lane. By keeping it as a separate lot, that would allow them to sell it to someone else in the future. Would they do that? Probably not. But by keeping these two lots as two separate lots under a common ownership, there's nothing that would prevent them from selling that off and then potentially creating problems down the road. The main point here, I think, is this one. The decision on whether or not to acquire that additional right-of-way, or require additional paving, is typically done at the platting stage when they are replatting the property. We believe that it's premature at this point to make a decision on whether or not to require that. We believe that you should require the replat, and then during the replat process is when that type of analysis would be done to determine, do we need additional right-of-way, do we need additional paving from this particular property. It also might preclude options that might be considered rather than a full waiver. Maybe there's a partial waiver. Maybe they put money in a financial guarantee to have it done in the future, or maybe there's a development agreement that they don't have to do it today, but they do it whenever the city comes in to improve the arterial. By not requiring the replat today, you're taking all those options off the table and saying they don't have to, we don't even have to review it or analyze it. As we discussed in the other item, any waiver of those improvements are shifting that obligation. Again, this is a minor arterial street that's planned to serve a currently undeveloped area long-term into the future, and so you're potentially creating an issue down the road for city taxpayers. bullet 2 makes that same point. You're not waiving costs. Somebody's going to pay those costs. The question is who ends up paying it, city taxpayers or each property as those properties develop. And in any case, you retain the final decision. If you make them replat, it's ultimately your decision when that replat comes through to waive these requirements. So as the Planning Commission has already suggested that they would waive those requirements, it seemed from the last meeting that you all are leaning that direction as well. That's ultimately your decision. So if you make them replat, but still think those requirements should not be an obligation on that property owner, that's your call at that point.
So John, right now you're just saying the decision that needs to be made today is whether or not to require a replatting.
That's correct.
That's the only decision that has to be made today. Or
Again,
if we want to go further and talk about financial obligations or who's responsible for what.
Yeah, and that discussion is really, we think, not appropriate for the abandonment process, which is what we're going through now. That's an appropriate discussion when the replat comes forward to what are the options at that point.
So basically, we are deciding today whether to ask them to replat, period.
Well, ultimately, you are deciding whether or not to abandon a right-of-way that is currently a city street. As part of that, we have typical conditions that are placed on the property owner who is seeking that abandonment. One of those is replatting the property, but as noted, the Planning Commission they recommended excluding that one. Also, the payment. This one has another one, which is the exchange for, as part of the whole process, acquiring the easement that we need along Bell Street. And then this last one is a somewhat unique one, but it's ensuring that currently that road right-of-way serves as a fire lane. So if something happens at that facility, fire trucks can get there on the road. This would simply require that they maintain a fire lane within that area so that fire trucks would still have that same ability to access the site. So again, in summary, your decision is whether or not to abandon the street, and as part of that, whether or not to require all 4 of these conditions.
And talk to me about the payment fee schedule 2625. That's required because?
We have, as part of our standard fee schedule, we have a calculation that basically the idea is we own a right to use that street. If we're going to give that up and basically sell the property to the adjacent property owner, there's a calculated fee. It's not technically a purchase of that abandoned property, but it's similar, and that's the way the fee is calculated.
And we, the city, need work. Part of the reason this conversation has come up is because the city needs the easement along Bell Street, which is part of this property.
Well, I wouldn't say, the city needs that easement, but we have other means by which to acquire that easement. It just so happened that one of the properties we were discussing an easement with during that same time came forward with this abandonment request, and so we folded that into this process. That would be going on independently. If you were to strike that condition, the city is still separately looking at acquiring that easement, whether or not this goes forward.
Is this Lucy and Harry? Did I notice that? Do y'all want to comment?
Well, I'd say I'd ask one question. Now, if we decided to do the replat on this, are we talking about South Marie for the owner to pave that particular area that we're suggesting that we want to abandon?
I think we found out from last meeting, Harry, that there's already done a seal coat on that property, that Marie Street, right? Isn't that what came up last time?
I think so, yes.
Legitimately, even though the picture shows it's a Caliche Street, it has since been seal coated, and so it's no longer Caliche Street. It's actually has treatment of some sort.
It was more than Caliche before they seal coated it. It wasn't just Caliche.
But we're not requiring them to do anything on that part, except for providing a fire lane, which can be caliche. That doesn't require pavement or concrete, but the longer answer is my understanding is they intend to use that for parking, so they will be paving or making concrete, or it might be caliche, but for a parking area. But all we would be requiring in that is that it be sufficient to support a fire truck as a fire lane. And that's all determined by the fire code. Again, if you struck that condition, that's going to be a condition anyway. But
I think that's a safety situation. I wouldn't strike that.
Lucy?
I don't have any problem with the way you have presented it and the conditions that you put down for approval.
Okay, so Lucy, with that, but you're not asking for the replat. If I remember Russell's talk from last time here was it's a very defined, 2 different plats. We're not requesting the replat to one, to leave it as 2.
For this, are you talking about this?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, to me, it's fine, the way you have presented it, but you're talking about the replat of the property, but you said that had nothing to do with it, right? That you were mainly talking about the abandonment of the street.
well, no, staff is recommending that our normal requirement of replatting the property applies in this case.
Okay.
The Planning Commission struck that requirement.
Okay.
And so while the whole overall big picture is an abandonment, really the root of the question for you today is, in order to abandon it, should you require a replat of the property or not?
Yes.
Is there a motion?
I think, Russell, did you want to talk? Public comment?
Well, we usually have a motion and a second before public comment, so I'm asking, is there a motion? And what is your motion?
To approve as presented.
With all 4 conditions?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do we have public comment?
Good morning, Council. Mayor Russell with SKG Engineering. The replat topic, if the way replatting works and the way abandonment works, it becomes technically impossible if you literally follow the way a replat is done to accomplish a replat prior to abandonment, because you're asking the property owner to replat something they don't own. And so we need to step back and really assess how this can be accomplished. And so we would ask that a replat not be required, but we would not mind purchasing this strip of property if it's Marie Street could be platted. It's large enough to meet the criteria for the zoning classification as a standalone lot, and it will accomplish what I hear the city wanting to accomplish with respect to the platting of this property. So maybe Mr. James could educate myself on how this could work, because the city has to file a quitclaim deed to the owner in order for them to incorporate it into their property, in order for them to replat this as a large tract. So you've kind of got us in a conundrum on how to really legally, technically accomplish this.
I think I agree with those comments, because we're asking to replat something they don't own yet. We've got, and we haven't, it seems to me we need to agree to abandon it first and then later decide whether we need to replat it. But we need the abandonment to happen before somebody can replat it, because they don't own it.
This is the normal way we do business. We did this over at the Elks when we closed an alley and it did it. You do it simultaneously. When you make the payment on this, then at that point in time, then you own that. So you do it all simultaneously. So all this is doing is so it doesn't have to be brought back either to the Planning Commission or to the council. So you do them, not necessarily in that order, but you do them all.
There's actually no point at which we could bring it back. Now is the only time you have to place the condition. But you're right, we do this every single abandonment. The abandonment is approved with these conditions. So then the abandonment technically doesn't happen until they've replatted. They replat. As part of the replat, there's a condition that the property be quitclaimed to them. And so you're right. In effect, it happens simultaneously because of the conditions of approval. Both things have a condition of approval that the other is met. And so once both are met, both the replat and the abandonment basically take place at the same time.
So, John, you probably said this more than once, but what's the issue if we're going to abandon the property and let, someone else have the property? What is their issue with replatting of the property? What's the issue?
I just don't think we ought to require them to replat the property. I'm in support of abandoning it. I just don't know why we would put that condition of approval to replat it as part of the conditions.
The ultimate issue would be the financial burden to the property owner if there are requirements to make improvements to Roosevelt and the other street. It puts the price of that little abandonment way out of reach or reason, and so becomes really technically, or by any business reasoning, a crazy move that they will not pursue. And so
Can you give me an example? So, for instance, when you talk about improvements required to Roosevelt and Marie, can you give me an example of what the cost impact?
For Bryan Street and Roosevelt Street, we're not going to have to do anything to Marie because it's being abandoned.
Okay.
And so it would be to Roosevelt and Bryan Street. So
Okay.
we would have to improve our incremental half of those two streets up to what the city standards are. So for Roosevelt, as its condition, we would be widening it. So you're talking about a $200,000 potential cost impact to widen Roosevelt and Bryan Street. Now, we're not going to talk about Bell Street because we believe it's already in the CIP project that's going to be widened and improved and have sidewalks. So if Bell Street wasn't a CIP, we would also be talking about it as well, but I'm hoping that the city's not going to shift a recognized financial burden from the city over to a private entity or an individual for that. So it puts the cost of a .64 acre tract at $200,000, and that's just not at all.
So we expect that at some future point, the city is going to make a requirement that something happened with Roosevelt and Bryan? I thought I understood John to say nothing was in the works for there to be anything done to those streets.
Well, we don't know. If you require the replat, we'll be making application to the city to replat this into one tract, and at that point in time, we'll have the discussion of whether to get variances for the improvements to Bryan and Roosevelt at that time. So it's, as we've all agreed, it's not a discussion for the abandonment. It's tied to a discussion for the platting process. So if we just totally take the replatting criteria off the table, it simplifies this tremendously, and we can all go on down the road and do business like we want to be doing business.
So what's the downside for the city if we don't require this replat?
Daniel, you want to comment on that?
No, I was just going to say, as far as the replat, if you do the replat at this point, it just goes to the Planning Commission for that decision. At this point, if the City Council makes a decision to not approve a replat or just leave that alone, then it takes that away from the Planning Commission. The decision is made here. So again, if you require for a replat, it does have to go to the Planning Commission for that decision.
So one of the issues with the replat is currently you have this property, which is the subject property. They are asking the city basically to sell them what is currently right-of-way. And our understanding is their intent is to then use that entire larger property as a single property. Mm-hmm. Typically, you would combine those two individual pieces into the one larger property. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you were to not require replat or simply to require them to replat this, because he's right, it does meet the minimum standards for a lot, you're still creating two separate lots that can be sold separately. They're treated separately because they're two separate lots. And so if this property expands into that, then you create issues by it still being two separate lots rather than one individual lot.
I'd like to add to that in the legal department, we see this come up typically when a property is resold, that the person who is purchasing the property believes that it is one contiguous property as far as platting is concerned. And right now, I don't think we have any development standards that would go into effect, but in a lot of cities, you're not allowed to build, for instance, across two different platted properties, so they would be prohibited from building if we did a rule like that. So it's one of those situations where today, it's hard to predict what effect having two adjacent, differently platted properties would be. And as to the issue of the road, that's pretty much how we ended up in that prior discussion. Mr. Gully is essentially asking you to make a decision on a second process that you haven't even approved going into to approve this abandonment. So it's hard. I don't know if John can say with any kind of certainty. I certainly can't what issues will come up, but these issues do come up on a very frequent basis.
I know I've just gone through a replatting with some property that my mom sold and I had to buy back. So I have some personal experience with platting and replatting.
There is a motion. Are there further public comment? The motion on the table is to accept as presented with the 4 conditions of approval. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
It passes 5-2. Moving on to item D, consider adopting a resolution nominating candidates to serve on the Board of Directors of the Tom Green County Appraisal District for the 2018-19 term. And Brian, you're our presenter today.
Yes. So this process is spoken about in the property in the state property tax code. This is just the nomination. This is not the voting process. What we essentially need today is for you'll to nominate 5 as a group. You'll nominate 5 names. So it'll be one motion nominating 5 names, or 5 different nominations. Or 5 different motions nominating 1 name, however you want to do it, but we just need 5 names today, and then an approval of a resolution. It would be better if we do it in one motion, because then we can adopt the resolution with those 5 names. So the history is the board as it currently exists, with the 5 members that are on it currently, have been on there since 2011. All of them have been on there 6 years. 2 of them have been on there 8 years. So that's really the history, and up to from here on, it's just your decision. Do you want to renominate some of those, all of them, none of them, however you want to do it?
Now, if
Brian,
I'm not,
let me
go
ask
ahead.
a question. We're the last taxing entity to look at these 5 people. The school district and the county, and I presume the outlying school districts, have already approved these 5 nominees. What we do today may or may not make any difference, since we've got 24% of that whole total vote. Is that correct?
Right. Well, we're not issuing the votes today. We're just putting nominees on there. But yes, your point is well taken. If you add a member that the other taxing entities don't put any votes to, and you split your votes, then that extra nominee is probably not going to be elected to the board.
Kind of seems like the cart is before the horse on this whole process, because I'm not sure, but again, you said they've already voted on it, so.
Well, they have not given their votes.
But they presented them as support of these 5.
They've nominated these 5, and it's based on our meeting schedule. When we get that letter from Bill Benson, which I got last week, we put it on this agenda as quickly as possible. But
I think a review of the process needs to happen, because it's really not for them to already nominate people for these positions and present them before we've even had a discussion on them seems backwards or
Again,
upside down.
the process is not something that we are, I mean,
I know.
it's spoken to by the Texas State Property Tax Code, and then Bill Benson gets out those letters to the entities all theoretically on the same day. There was some delay, and it did not come to me, and so I had to request the letter. So that was one process, and I've asked them in the future to make sure that they send it to me instead of whoever else they're sending it to, just to make sure that I'm able to get it on the agenda, fast enough. However, we wouldn't have been able to get it on the last meeting, so it would be here either way. You might have known about it a little sooner, but it would still be on this meeting. Now, the opportunity you have is if you nominate a new person, you can force that person to be on the board when you allocate your votes. If you allocated all of your votes to one person, it's 24% of the total votes, it would get that one person elected. That is totally up to you. So you do have some power. I mean, as the third largest taxing, or as the second largest taxing entity, one of the top three, we do have a lot of power, and we can make sure that at least one person gets elected of our choosing. Again, totally up to you how you want to go forward.
So how do we do this, Brian? Do we just say out names?
You can talk out names until somebody's ready to make a motion, and then you can make that motion, to nominate those five.
What's the length of service that this?
2 years?
It's a 2-year term. It'll begin January 1st, and it'll run through December 31st of 2019.
I'd like to throw out the name David Nallon.
Does anybody else have a name that they want to put out there?
Tell us who the five are. The current.
The five are John Begnod, John Kahn, Russell DeVore, Louis Gomez, and Bob Reeves. And Bob Reeves and John Begnod have been on there for 8 years. The other ones have been on there for 6, I believe.
And the length of their terms are?
2-year terms,
But
every one of
in
them.
total, can they have as many 2-year terms, like for 10 years,
It's
20 years?
It's
or-
unlimited.
It's unlimited.
There are no limit on the terms that I'm aware of.
Do
Well, I think our hands are tied personally. I don't know that we can make a different decision than these 5 particular names.
Well, again, if you find one name that you all like, when we go to allocate the votes, you can put 1,001 votes toward that person and make sure that they're going to be elected, because that would be 20% of the total votes that person would receive. That would be most of your votes, since you get 1,200 and let me pull that up. Sorry. There are 5,000 total votes, and as a city, we are allocated 1,293. So 1,001 would make sure that somebody gets elected if you have a new name.
The key is, if there's a name that you want on that list, get it on the list. That's the first step.
Right, exactly.
Got to be nominated to be able to vote for them. And that's all we're doing today, right, Brian?
That's right. We're
You're
just
not
doing the
voting
nomination.
as a priority in terms of the 5 names, right?
Sorry?
We're not voting today in terms of putting votes behind anybody. We're simply putting a name out there.
We're simply nominating 5 people, and then I believe it'll probably be the first meeting in November when we allocate the votes. It'll be either the first or second meeting in November we'll allocate those votes.
All right,
that'll
go ahead, Billy.
I'm sorry. So that'll give us a chance. I know none of these people. I know John Begnod from TV, I think.
Right.
And his plant section, but the other people, including the name that we just heard up here, I know nothing about these people. So
Right.
this is the first, I heard of it when we got the agenda. So if we put a name on the list, then can we get background information from you, Brian, on who they are and what they do? And
I can request that from the appraisal district, or I can try to contact those individuals as soon as I have that information. I'm not sure what I'll get back, because it just depends on the names that we actually get. But I can try to get as much information as I can to y'all.
Go ahead, Lucy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
So the nominations have whoever we might think of later on. We can't do it later on. We have to do it today.
The nominations are today, yes, and again, the process is a little complicated, but it's a state law, so
The state law says what that makes it today the day, meaning when do they start the process so that we could back it up by 60 days so we don't get into this cart before the horse?
Well, the chief appraiser has to prepare a ballot listing the candidates before October 30th, which is why we're kind of on a time crunch. I think the letters went out in June, but as Brian said, we didn't receive ours in a timely manner.
So can we demand they've got their October 30th. What is our last, what do we want to put out there is that we have to have that in our hands for consideration by?
Well, and I have spoken to them about who they sent it to. And I talked to him last year, but I talked to Bill Benson this time and said, please make sure this gets to me so that I can get it on the agenda. Again, I don't know that we'd have been able to get it before the last agenda because the letter did go out in September. It went out September 11th. Chances are that we'd have been able to get it and put it on the agenda in time, right, or would have been pretty close. But at least I could have forwarded it to all of you much sooner. If that's what y'all would like me to do in a future year, as soon as I get it, I can forward it to y'all in a Friday packet or something like that.
Well, I think that next time, as soon as you get it, it should automatically be placed on the agenda for the next council meeting, even if that's before we get our agenda packets. So,
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. We get it on the agenda as soon as I get the letter. I went from knowing about the letter coming to me because I had contacted the appraisal district. I called Daniel immediately and said, do you mind if I add this to the agenda, which he was in complete support of. So we did, as far as city staff, as soon as we had the letter, we got it on there. It's just like Teresa mentioned, there is a time crunch. Our resolution has to be adopted by the 15th in order for him to prepare the ballot. That gives him 2 weeks to prepare the ballot and get it out to us by the 30th. Again, as soon as it's on, I'll get it. I believe we have to adopt the resolution for the vote totals by the first meeting in December. So I'll get it on as early as I can in November. So even if y'all don't want to allocate the votes in the first meeting in November, theoretically you could allocate them in the second meeting if we do have 2 meetings in November. So I'll get it on as soon as I get that ballot back from the appraisal district. I'll get it on for y'all's consideration.
Ryan, can you tell us exactly what these people do? I think we need to know what that job responsibility is. If we want to make a decision to put somebody else's name on the ballot, we really need to know what these 5 people have been doing for these last 6 or 8 years. What are...
Right. Let me actually... received that question last week, and I said, as a simple answer, the appraisal district serves all of the local taxing entities, as you know. Number one, performing the appraisals of the tax parcels. They oversee that process. They don't actually perform the appraisal, but they oversee that process. Properly applying the exemptions, they make sure that's, and the way they do that is there's a remediation process. If a property property owner wants to protest their value or whatever, they're able to go in and do that. And so the appraisal board kind of oversees all of that.
Have there been any changes directed by these 5 people about the process over the past year, 2 years?
I am not aware of any changes to the process.
Is that
I
because
would-
it's a very tight process driven by the state, so on a local level, they don't have flexibility? Or they do have flexibility, it's just not been?
I think a great deal of it is spoken to in the state law. If wholesale changes would be needed, I believe it would require the state law to be changed.
Because the question mark is what authority and power do these people have in terms of impact on property taxes or approach to property taxes outside what is dictated to them by the state?
Well, the key here is they don't determine taxes. They determine values.
Right.
And
Yes, but the
they're
values are what are taxed.
Yes, and they're the governing board for that organization, and so they do what you do for this organization.
They don't actually perform the appraisal. They do oversee the remediation process, as I understand it. So that when
You want to come forward, because I think you have a lot of information that you could share with us, and we're going to put you on the spot, because I know you represent a lot of people. We're glad you
Council, thank you. Candy Poole, Executive Vice President, San Angelo Association of Realtors. The little bit I know about the appraisal process, I'll just kind of fill you in with that. The appraisers utilize some of the data that our association gives them on helping them to come up with a value of properties, and they reevaluate because of state law every year certain properties, and so it has to be done every 3 years. Areas. They also have to be within 5% of what the market is. Well, the only way they know about the market really is through the MLS solds. And so through confidential information, we pass that sold information on to the county appraiser so that they can do their job. The school board sets their tax rate. You set the city tax rate, and the county sets their tax rate. And so the appraisal, let's say the property is $100,000 appraised, then those tax rates are added in, and so you have the 3 different ones. The board does not make a decision on the individual values. They oversee the processing, how the appraisers do their business, the remedial board, which is the review board. The review board, when someone, they have the process in the July, August timeframe, says, I don't like what you valued my property at, they can go before an appeals hearing, and there's an appeals process, and it is different people than the 5 members on the board, and they hear from the public. And they make a determination if the value set by the appraiser of the county is within the reason, it's right, it's got its bounds, da-da-da-da-da. So it is not the board of directors, those 5 names, that hear that. It's a remedial board, 2 different things. The board itself, the board of directors, these 5, the way I understand it, they oversee process, they oversee the remedial process, making sure it's done right, and they oversee the appraisal portion, making sure everything is, the tax rates from the 3 entities are applied appropriately. They make sure the state law is followed in all of that. And understand this 5% within the property value the state requires, or the county gets a penalty tax. And the reason years ago we started helping them know, because we're the only ones with sold data, is because the county, that means you and me as taxpayers, paid over $3.5 million in a fine to the state of Texas because we were not within that 5% and had not gotten there, and we're not appraising fast enough and getting things done properly. And so Bill Benson has just bent over backwards. He does everything he can to make our county and the process as done as well as it can be. We cooperate with them. He cooperates with our association, and together we've helped that process along, and the county has not had this fine since then. So that's just kind of an overview for you, and I hope that helps you a little bit.
Ms. Paul, would you like to be on the board?
I do know a little bit about real estate, and I would love to someday. Thank you, Lucy.
Okay, and I do have state law provided to us by the comptroller, kind of a summary of their duties. They establish the appraisal district office. They hire the chief appraiser. They adopt the annual operating budget for the appraisal district. They appoint the appraisal review board. So they, as she mentioned, they're not directly involved in the process of the remediation, but they do appoint those members that are over that. So they oversee it in a way. They select the chairman and secretary from the appraisal review board. They notify us of any vacancy on the board and all this process. Elect from members a chair and a secretary at the first meeting of their meeting. It kind of goes on and on. I don't think the rest of them are as big as the first little bit there. So I can continue to read if you want me to, but I don't want to bore you with just details either.
Do we vote one person at a time or to a slate of people if we have more than one person we want to appoint?
It would be easier for us if you could make it in one motion adopting a resolution with those 5 names.
I'm going to nominate Candy Poole.
Nominate David Nowlin.
Any other names for consideration?
I'm good with the list.
Then is there a second on the motion of David Nowlin? No? Yes?
What, 3, essentially, if you're going to add the 2 new ones, what 3 old ones are you going to put on there? Or do you have any other new ones? I need a motion with 5 names.
Can it
So
have
you
7 names?
It can't be the best of
cannot,
7?
We cannot do 7 names. We can only nominate 5 names by state law.
Well, it creates a problem because I think most of us don't have a lot of good background on the 5 that are there, so it's pretty hard to say that we want 2 removed without knowing a little more about having an opportunity to interview these people or talk to these people.
You can nominate just 2, I would guess, and not make nominations for the other 3 slots.
That's what I'm asking is can we just nominate those 2 people without asking that 2 people not be? Just a minute.
I would assume that you can, but I don't. Do we have a way to verify that?
I'm not seeing anything.
Steve, did you have a comment? Or I see somebody waving arms or legs or something out there.
Council Candy Poole again. I can give you background on 2 of those members. Bob Reeves is a past council member several years ago, and he is also a realtor member and has been, but I think he's been on 8 years now. Russell DeVore is also a longtime realtor in San Angelo, and I think he's been on 6 years. And those 2 I know and have known for over 20 years, both of them, and their business is real estate.
John Kahn is a property owner in the area, and he has been for a long time. Luis Gomez is an accountant that has a business probably 30-plus years. And whoever the last one, John Vegno.
And he has served on several boards, I believe.
So all of those individuals are good people. I don't know that that's the question. I think the bottom line is if we would have known further on advance, we could have made some decisions whether we wanted to go with these 5 people or whether we had other people that we wanted to introduce in this process. You know, some of them have been there 6 years, some of them 8 years. At some point in time in the future, you want to introduce new blood. But whether or not we've got that, we can do that today with 7 people coming to the realization of 5 names, I'm not sure we can.
Well, I think there's a motion to nominate 2 new people without consideration for taking 2 people off. So we're simply nominating a slate of 2 additional people or 7 people.
5.
He said we could. They just.
So you would just be nominating 2.
Then would that then allow us, when it comes time to allocate our votes, to allocate all of our votes to only those two people.
It would not prevent you from voting on all
Three other
seven
people.
that might be on the ballot. It wouldn't prevent you from allocating your votes to anybody that's on that ballot.
So of the 7, we could allocate our votes towards 5 people, or divide it by 7.
Right. Typically, the way we present it is each council member has, if you divided it by 7, you've got this many votes, and then there's like a leftover of 5 or so votes that you would have to agree to as a council. In the past, it's not been a problem, divvying out those votes. Usually, it's pretty much even among the 5 people that you want to vote for. Again, if during this process you want to force one of the new nominees on there, then you would have to approach that a little differently this time and make sure that 1,001 votes go to one person would essentially force that person onto the board.
Let's clarify, we're not limited to the 2 we nominate today. We can vote for the entire 7.
Right. The ballot will be brought back with all the new names. I probably would recommend that you at least nominate and again do what you would like to do. I would recommend that we suggest 5 names, even if it's the 2 and then the ones with the longest tenure or the shortest tenure, however you want to do it, just so at least we have a resolution with 5 names, however you want to do it.
I'd like a resolution just nominating the 2 people we've nominated, and then we will vote a later date in terms of how those votes would be split amongst the 7 people. Yes. Is there a
I'm sorry,
question?
she just found a thing that we do have to nominate 5 names. We cannot nominate just 2. And that's the reason I was kind of recommending that. I didn't want it to invalidate our resolution.
Again, I'll go back and say, before we get here 2 years from now, we need to be educated a little more. We need to have some further advance notice than just this 4 or 5 days so that we can do what we need to do. It's going to be tough for 7 people to make a decision on 5 names today, especially since we've introduced 2 other names.
We could include 3 of these 5 that are already on the list.
Exactly.
Again,
Tom, would you like to nominate 5 people?
I'd like to include John Bagnell that's on this list and John Kahn that's on the list too. So that'll get us up
We
to 4.
now have David Nowen, we have John Begnaud, we have John Kahn, and we have Candy Poole. Do I have another nominee?
Luis Gomez.
And we have Luis Gomez.
That's our 5.
We now have a slate of 5 people, meaning John Begnaud, John Kahn, Luis Gomez, Candy Poole, and David Nowen.
Okay, and that's your motion. Okay, do I have a second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposed votes. All right, so we are now on to item 7. Any follow-up and administrative issues that we need to address today or future agenda items? If not, then I ask for a motion for adjournment. Oh, with just one moment, I have a hand in the audience.
Ginger Moore. I live in San Angelo, and I'm in Tommy's district and the new fire station. I noticed he did not put up on the board where that's going to be located.
We talked about that.
Oh, earlier? Because
Yes.
it's not going to have much room to expand. It's in a water area that floods, and it also has people right behind it and all that motion, all those fire trucks. So I don't know. Does anybody have an answer?
And we can talk to you after this meeting is over and get you that information, but right now we've already covered that topic, and we can't discuss that at this point.
We can't discuss it.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
A second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're going to keep on working on it.